know worries? Let me begin by asking you a very simple question, and that is, do you know people who face situations that causes them to worry? See, all around us, we see family members as well as friends who seem to worry about situations day in and day out. In fact, it often appears that they will worry themselves to death. Yet, ironically, many of those who worry happens to be choir members, happens to be usher board members, happens to be members of the cloth. Just to sum it all up, happens to be church members who profess now a strong faith in God's power of deliverance. They say that they pray about situations that are out of their hands, but they still worry. They say they put their burdens in the hands of God, and they worry about them 24 hours a day. They say they trust God, but they toss and turn in their sleep at night, worrying as if God would let them down. The old proverb says, if you are going to pray, then don't worry. And if you are going to worry, then don't pray. Did you hear what I said? You know that. If you're going to pray, what? Don't worry. And if you're going to worry, don't pray. I want you to consider with me this grandmother whose grandson had been falsely accused of robbing a store. The young man had been home with her on the night of the robbery. But the police wind up rejecting his alibi because an old grandmother would say anything to help her grandson. The grandmother was 75 years old and taught Sunday school in the church. Over her years, she learned to trust God. She prayed to God for strength to do what she could for her grandson, but acknowledged that she could accept God's will. She dug into her savings, sold some of her possessions, and borrowed money for his defense. Finally, the old lady prayed again and said, Lord, I've done all I can. My boy's fate is in your hands. Each day, mind you, she went to the trial and she watched as the case against her grandson unfolded. It looked terrible. And there was even an eyewitness that identified him. The grandmother showed no emotions and slept soundly at night. When the verdict came in, everyone was surprised that her grandson was found not guilty. You see, days later, she received a phone call from a woman on the jury, and she said that her nephew had been falsely accused during the trial after an eyewitness accused him of murder. She said if her nephew could be falsely identified, then the old lady's grandson might have been not guilty as well. The juror said what was amazing was as soon as the not guilty verdict was announced, the charges against my nephew were dropped on the same day. And therefore, she said, it was nothing but God. When the grandmother hung up the phone, she cried tears of joy because behind the scene, you don't understand, behind the scene, God had worked it out and answered her prayer. You see, the grandmother in this illustration demonstrates the difference between worry and concern. You see, concern prompts us to do what you can about a situation, focusing on solving the problem, trusting God for the outcome, even if it is not what you want. Worry is to focus on the impact of an adverse effect on a situation. Whether we worry or not describes our approach to any troubling situation. You see, some roll up their sleeves and do what they can do, trusting that results will always benefit God's plan for our lives. Because you see, God's plan for our lives to worry is to think about what could happen if the problem is not solved in the way we desire. But Jesus said, do not worry, saying, what shall we eat? Or what shall we drink? Or what shall we wear? The main idea is to please God between you and any trouble you face. Worry takes God out of the formula, leaving you to meet the challenge alone, with only thoughts of failure to guide you. See, Jesus encourages us today to be concerned but not to worry. I said Jesus is trying to encourage us through this word to be concerned, but look at somebody and say, but not to worry. See, when God is in the picture, you have concern. But the problem is not hopeless because God is your hope. When we are concerned, we act in faith. But when we worry, we act without faith. And we have our pity parties in hopelessness. See, we should approach every day and every problem with an attitude of Hakuna Matata, Swahili for no worries for the rest of your days. Not just no worries, but for the rest of your days. You know, this attitude was made famous in the Disney movie, The Lion King. But in 1988, Bobby McFerrin said it differently in his hit song, don't worry, be happy. So you see, as kingdom citizens, as children of the Most High God, we are concerned about troubling situations. But we have learned to take our burdens to the Lord and just leave them there. You see, we trust God for the outcome of any situation and sleep well because we know that He will work it out for the good of them that love the Lord. Well, let's look at this text for a moment. For the text focuses on Jesus, teaching about trusting God for material provisions. See, Jesus told his disciples that they would pray for good provisions of material things daily, without any intense focus on future feast, future homes, future garment that would wear. Such thoughts tends to distract our focus from our daily dependence on God to fulfill the kingdom goals through us. Even in the Lord's Prayer, He said we should ask God to give us this day our daily bread. The implication is that we should not worry about tomorrow, because God will provide for tomorrow, just as he provided for today. My dad would oftentimes say, and when tomorrow comes, tomorrow will be today. See, this was not a new godly promise, mind you. When Israel wandered in the wilderness, you Bible scholars remember this, God promised them enough bread and meat for a single day, with instructions now not to worry about tomorrow. Each day he provided manna and quail, and as the Sabbath approached, he supplied enough to cover that time as well. See, Jesus' teaching about worrying is not an instruction to put off worrying about tomorrow until tomorrow actually comes. Instead, he instructs us to stop worrying altogether and rely heavily on God's grace. Somebody ought to call somebody on the phone at home and say, stop worrying altogether. See, the teaching makes sense, because if we drag today's worries over into tomorrow, it only doubles our burdens. And as each day's worries are carried forward, it multiplies instead of reducing our concern. So instead, Jesus says to us, let tomorrow take the thoughts for the things of itself. The idea is for believers. The idea is for everybody who said, I'm a child of God, to deal with today's issues and leave tomorrow's issues to God. You see, through our daily prayer, we gain enough strength to deal with the problems of a particular day, trusting that God will also give us sufficient strength to deal with future issues. He pointed to the birds of the air and the grass of the field, all of which the providence of God daily. You see, since we also are a part of his creation, we should feel safe pursuing the kingdom of God and his righteousness, knowing that God will add all of the other things that we need to survive and even thrive unto us. This teaching, saints, is sprinkled all throughout the Bible. Psalms 55:22 says, cast thy burdens upon the Lord, and he shall sustain thee. He shall never suffer the righteous to be moved. Then over in Proverbs, the 27th chapter, verse 1 says, boast not thyself of tomorrow, for thou knowest not what a day may bring forth. You see, Scripture teaches us to be concerned about tomorrow, but don't worry about tomorrow. Thoughtful preparation for the future is not rebuked, but fretting about it is condemned. See, there's reasons not to worry. There is an old phrase that has been passed down through our generation. It's part of what English teachers call the penguin language. Of course, it's not standard English, but our folks understand its meaning. I ain't gonna worry about it. I ain't gonna worry about it. And it simply means I won't worry about what is not within my power. But I would not lose faith either, because God is in control. See, there are several reasons we don't worry about things. And the first reason today is because we trust God for the little things. We trust God for the little things. When Christ gave examples of reasons not to worry, he pointed to the simple things of life, such as the birds of the air or blades of the grass, that indicates that God is the master of all large and the small, the finite and the infinite. He has power over every aspect of our life. Therefore, we don't worry because we trust him for everything, even the little things. We trust God for not something, but we trust God for everything. And our list of little things contain items such as how well I pray for all the stuff I have, or how I am going to get everything done, or even little things like how am I going to find a parking space at the mall. The worry list values, and it can go on and on and on. You see, the Greek word for worry is actually two words, morizo and naos, which means to divide the mind. Concentrating on things that divide the mind places us in a chokehold every day. Worrying over little things can divide our thinking and strangling our spirits. Excessive worries has the tendency to keep us frustrated, keep us divided, and keep us all choked up. Like the sparrows of the air, it would be better to just trust God. Don't worry about finding a parking space. Just get in the car and trust God to show you where a space will open when you get to the mall. And in life, see, don't worry about what to cook for dinner, or what happens if your team loses the basketball game. In everything, trust God. No matter how it turns out, in everything, God will work it out for your advantage. The second reason we don't worry about things is because we never face the unknown alone. We never face the unknown alone. You see, Jesus taught believers not to worry about the unknowns of tomorrow, because the same God who provides for us today, Deke, will provide with us tomorrow. Tomorrow is a great unknown, but Pastor, God knows tomorrow. And therefore, we need to stay close to God. And then when we get close to God, get closer to God. And then when we've gotten closer to God, get even closer to God. Because we need to stay close to God and hold his hand as we face the unknown. That's why both the Old and New Testament of the Bible encourages us that no matter what might happen in your life, to do what? Just trust God. The outcome of tomorrow depends on God and not us. We do not know what tomorrow will bring, but God does. This is best summarized in the lyrics of the song that says, I don't worry about tomorrow. I just live from day to day. I don't borrow from its sunshine, for its skies may turn to gray. I don't worry o'er the future, for I know what Jesus said. And today I'll walk beside him, for he knows what is ahead. Many things about tomorrow I don't seem to understand, but I know who holds tomorrow. and I know who holds my hand. Come on, give God some praise, if you will. You see, we should face tomorrow confident that God, that what comes, what may, God will always intervene when he has to, especially if his intervention will save us. Now, the third reason we don't worry about things is because worries disappear when we focus on God. Listen to that again. Worries disappear when we focus on God. I believe somebody got some stuff that got to disappear when we focus on God. See, there's a simple way to achieve Hakuna Matata, and that is to stay focused on Christ and the work of the kingdom, and not on all that could go wrong. Have you ever noticed that those who rescue others from a high place tell the victims, don't look down? They tell them to look at me. There is a reason for that. See, a victim who looks down constantly thinks about what happens if they fall. Am I right? They see themselves splattered on the ground. They know and begin to feel the pain they will feel if they are fortunate enough to escape death. They see a crippled life, riddled by injury. They see nothing but negatives if they look down. So I stopped by to tell you to look at God. For whenever we're told to look at God, don't you realize we have the tendency to look up? Because as long as we look up, everything gonna be all right. But look at those who climb mountains. They climb straight up the side of the mountain's face, sustained by a system of ropes that are hooked and that are tied in so many ways that it is impossible to fall. Even if the climber lets go, he will not fall to the mountain bottom. Yet climbers know that climbing mountains can play tricks with their brains, especially if they look down. See, looking down focuses on what can happen. If all the ropes and knots fail, or if the mountain itself collides. The idea is not to focus on falling, but on safely making it to the top. Lord, don't move the mountain. Just give me the strength to climb it. I've been on this battlefield for a long time. And oh God, I ain't got time to come down. I'm going to keep my eyes on the star post of glory, and I'm going to keep climbing till I make it to the top. I heard somebody say, Pastor, that 99 and a half, come on somebody, just won't make it. It won't do it. I got to make 100. Every trouble or problem we face is like a mountain that we must climb. However, God has secured us, even though we are surrounded by danger. So Christ tells us to take no thoughts or negative possibility. God says, I got you. I got you. The central truth of Christ's message is to stay focused on God, and our anxiousness will disappear. Philippians 4, 6, and 7 says, do not be anxious about anything, but in everything, by prayer and petition, with thanksgiving, present your request to God. Sound like you will have it together. First of all, I ain't anxious, God, about anything. I ain't anxious. I don't pray for patience. I know you too well. So therefore, in everything and in this today, my prayer and petition, oh God, I come to you. But before I lay it down, I'm just going to thank you for it. You remember when the children of Israel would go off to battle? Before they did one fight, before they swung one sword, they went down singing and praising God. Why? Because they knew that the battle was not theirs, but that the battle what belonged to God. So when you know your situation that God's got it, don't wait to shout. Go ahead on and shout now, because you know that the victory is yours. If we stay focused on God, listen, our worries will disappear. So then, kingdom citizens, as I come to a close, finally, we must remember that no matter how dark the future may seem, God is watching out for our tomorrow. The end effect of Christ's sermon on the Mount was that believers were left with a deepened faith in God's ability to protect them and provide for their tomorrow. He may have pointed to the birds of the air or the grass under our feet. But Christ reminds believers that God is watching out for us. He's watching out for us by protecting us and by providing for us and ensuring our survival as well as our growth from generation to generation. I stopped by to tell you that these truths were a part of Christian sermons that we describe as his missionary charge to each and every one of the believers. The Lord charged believers then and has charged believers today that we should continue our non-kingdom work with renewed hope that is restored. When we think about God's protective presence going before us into the unknown tomorrow, we continue each and every day with McFerrin's attitude. Don't worry, but be happy. Because despite all of the dangers that tomorrow might present, we know God is watching. God is watching over us. Because God is watching over us, we sing songs of our forefathers all day, all night. Angels keep watching over me, my Lord, because God is watching over us. We may be concerned about tomorrow, but we will worry because we know his eyes is on the sparrow. And I know he watches. Father, have mercy over me, because God is watching over us. We don't swallow in self-pity. We won't slip because we fall down. You ought to look at somebody and say, I fall down, but I get up. I may fall down, but I won't stay down, because my God, he's a good God. My God, he walks with me. My God, he talks with me.